Hostin never stops ripping on the cops.
As a mother of black children, I know that black boys are not given the presumption of innocence and the presumption of youth.
Sunny Hostin thought she had the moral high ground. She went on The View, told a story about her all-white neighborhood, claimed she had to introduce her son to police so they wouldn't harass him while training for the Junior Olympics. The audience clapped. Her co-hosts nodded. Twitter erupted with support. Then Tyrus and Gutfeld got hold of the clip. What happened next wasn't just a response, it was a demolition. On Gutfeld, Tyrus didn't hold back. He called it what it was. A hoax, a performance, a lie wrapped in victimhood to score political points. And the internet exploded. Tonight, I'm breaking down exactly what Sunny said, why it fell apart under scrutiny, and how Tyrus exposed the deeper problem with elite liberals cosplaying as oppressed while living in million-dollar homes. The worst part? She never backed down, and her defenders made it worse. Sunny Hostin is a co-host on The View, a former federal prosecutor, and someone who regularly positions herself as a voice for marginalized communities. She's built a brand around calling out racism, demanding accountability, and lecturing America about its failures. Fair enough. Except when the story she tells doesn't add up, and the details reveal something else entirely. Privilege dressed up as persecution. The segment that sparked everything aired recently on The View. The panel was discussing a Netflix documentary called The Perfect Neighbor, which covers the tragic 2023 killing of Ajik Owens.
Just a group of cops, just a little herd of policemen just walk around a white neighborhood looking for people like me.
A black mother shot by her white neighbor in Florida after confronting her about harassing Owens' children with racial slurs and thrown objects. Heavy topic. Real injustice. The kind of story that deserves serious conversation. Hostin used the moment to share her own experience. She said, quote, "As a mother of black children, I know that black boys are not given the presumption of innocence and the presumption of youth. So far, that's a legitimate concern many black parents share. Then came the part that raised eyebrows." She continued, "I have had to be in the position where I have gone to my local police department because I know my son is going to be training for the Junior Olympics, running around the neighborhood in an all-white neighborhood, and I have brought him to the police and said, 'He belongs to me. This is my son. Do not harass him. Do not stop him.'" Let that sink in. She said she proactively took her son to the police station, introduced him, and warned them not to harass him. The implication was clear. Her white neighbors and local cops were so racist, so quick to assume criminality, that she had to preemptively defend her child from harassment. The View audience ate it up. Social media praised her courage. But then people started asking questions. First question, did this actually happen? Hostin never said the police had actually harassed her son.
Mother of black children, I know that black boys are not given the presumption of innocence and the presumption of youth. I have had to be in the position where I have gone to my local police department because I know my son is going to be training for the Junior Olympics, running around the neighborhood in an all-white neighborhood, and I have brought him to the police and said, "He belongs to me. This is my son. Do not harass him. Do not stop him."
She never said her neighbors had called the cops on him. She never provided a single example of him being stopped, questioned, or threatened. The entire story was preventative. She assumed it would happen, so she took action. That's not evidence of racism. That's evidence of assumption. Second question, where does she live? Turns out Sunny Hostin lives in a very expensive area. We're talking serious money. The kind of neighborhood where everyone knows everyone, where crime is virtually non-existent, and where a kid running in athletic gear for Olympic training wouldn't raise suspicion. It would be celebrated. The idea that her son, clearly an athlete in training, would be mistaken for a criminal in broad daylight in one of the safest neighborhoods in the region? Statistically absurd. Third question, what was she really doing? That's where Gutfeld and Tyrus came in. They didn't just dismiss her story. They dissected it, and they didn't do it quietly. Gutfeld opened the segment by calling it a hoax. Not a misunderstanding, not an exaggeration. A hoax. He framed it as Hostin manufacturing a narrative of oppression where none existed. using her platform to paint her wealthy, safe community as a hotbed of racial profiling. Gutfeld pointed out the obvious. If you're wealthy enough to live in an all-white, exclusive neighborhood, and your son is training for the Junior Olympics, you're not oppressed, you're privileged, and pretending otherwise insults people who actually face systemic barriers. Then Tyrus took over, and this is where it got real. Tyrus, who is black, didn't just critique Hostin's story. He called out the underlying dishonesty. He said, and this is key, that people like Hostin use race as a shield to deflect criticism and as a sword to attack anyone who questions them. He said her story wasn't about protecting her son. It was about performing victimhood for an audience that rewards it. He accused her of lying, not because the incident didn't happen, but because the framing was deliberately misleading. He went further. Tyrus said Hostin's approach does real damage to actual victims of racism. When you cry wolf in a safe neighborhood with zero evidence of harassment, you make it harder for people who genuinely suffer from profiling to be believed. You turn serious issues into political theater, and you insult the intelligence of everyone watching. Tyrus also pointed out the class issue. Hostin lives in luxury. Her son isn't running through a rough neighborhood dodging gang violence. He's jogging through tree-lined streets in an area where the median home price would make most Americans faint.
Is feeling guilty about being a successful black lady who lives with white people, so she has to play.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Successful slave-owning black woman. Get it right.
Yes.
The idea that cops in that jurisdiction, who likely know the residents personally, would profile her son is absurd. And if she genuinely believed they would, why is she still living there? Why not move to a community where she feels safe? That question hung in the air, unanswered, because the answer exposes the game. Hostin doesn't actually believe her neighborhood is racist. She just needed a story that fit the narrative, and The View, ever eager to validate victimhood, gave her the platform to tell it unchallenged. The reaction online split predictably. Hostin's defenders said Tyrus and Gutfeld were dismissing the real fears black parents face. They argued that even if nothing happened to her son, her concerns were valid because systemic racism exists. They accused Tyrus of betraying his own community by siding with conservatives. But here's the problem with that defense. It conflates legitimate concerns with fabricated victimhood. Yes, black boys face disproportionate scrutiny in many contexts. Yes, profiling happens. Yes, parents have every right to worry. But none of that justifies inventing a scenario, presenting it as fact, and using it to smear an entire community as racist without evidence. Critics hammered Hostin for exactly that. They pointed out that she never said her son was harassed. She never said neighbors complained. She never said police stopped him. The entire story was based on her assumption that it would happen, which says more about her biases than her neighbors. One commenter wrote, "Ironic. She makes the absolute worst assumptions about her white neighbors having the absolute worst assumptions about her." That's the core issue. Hostin projected racism onto people who hadn't done anything, then framed herself as the victim. Others pointed out the absurdity of her solution.
They're like, put it away, put the baton away, Johnson. You got away this time, kid, because if you weren't Sonny Halston's son,
If you genuinely believe your local police are so racist, they'd harass your son for jogging, why would you introduce him to them? Wouldn't that make him more of a target? Wouldn't you avoid interaction entirely? The logic doesn't hold. But it doesn't need to hold when the goal is narrative, not truth. Tyrus didn't let it go. In the days following the segment, he doubled down. He said people like Hostin exploit their platforms to push division, not unity. He said she could use her voice to highlight real injustice, but instead she manufactures outrage to stay relevant. And he said the audience, especially the black community, deserves better than performative victimhood from wealthy elites who live insulated lives. That last point stung because it's true. Hostin's annual salary is in the millions. She lives in comfort most Americans can't imagine. Her son has opportunities most kids don't. And instead of using her privilege to lift others, she uses it to claim oppression. That's not advocacy, that's exploitation. The fallout reached beyond Gutfeld. Other commentators piled on. Outkick's Stacey Washington said she wished she'd been on The View that day to call Hostin out. In real time, conservative outlets ran headlines like, Sonny Hostin warned cops not to harass son in all-white neighborhood, with the unspoken question, what harassment? Liberal outlets defended her, but the defenses were weak. They relied on, you don't understand what black mothers go through, which is a thought-terminating cliche designed to shut down legitimate criticism. But some people do understand, including Tyrus, who is black, and who said Hostin's story undermines real conversations about race, including black commentators who pointed out that wealthy black elites like Hostin don't speak for working-class black families who face actual profiling in under-resourced neighborhoods, including people of all races who simply value truth over narrative. The deeper issue here isn't just Hostin, it's what she represents. She's part of a media class that profits from division. The View thrives on outrage. The more they can frame America as irredeemably racist, the more they justify their existence as moral arbiters, but that requires constant content. And when real examples don't materialize, you manufacture them.
Did you see Gutfeld last night? Were you here when Sonny came in with her son?
Yeah.
And they'll find out it never happened.
It never happened, and you're right. But she's inferring that they are reflexively racist.
Right.
Now, I don't know where she lives. The View tapes in New York, right?
You take a non-event, a kid jogging in a safe neighborhood, and turn it into a referendum on systemic racism. You ignore context, evidence, and common sense, and you dare anyone to challenge you. And if they do, you call them racist. Tyrus broke that cycle. He challenged the story, demanded evidence, and called out the dishonesty. And he did it as a black man, which made it harder for Hostin's defenders to dismiss him as a clueless white conservative. They tried anyway. They called him a sellout, a token, a traitor, the usual attacks. But none of them addressed the substance. None of them explained why Hostin's story should be believed without evidence. None of them justified turning assumption into accusation. Gutfeld backed Tyrus up with data. He pointed out that Hostin's neighborhood has virtually no crime. He noted that police in wealthy areas are trained to handle residents with kid gloves. Not suspicion. He highlighted the absurdity of a federal prosecutor, someone who understands burden of proof, making serious allegations without a shred of evidence. And he tied it all back to the broader problem. Elite liberals cosplaying as oppressed while regular people deal with real problems. The segment went viral. Clips flooded YouTube, Rumble, and social media. Conservative audiences cheered. Liberal audiences seethed. And in the middle, a lot of people who don't identify with either side just nodded, because they recognized what Tyrus was saying. Stop lying, stop performing, stop using race as a get-out-of-criticism free card. If something happened, tell the truth. If nothing happened, don't invent it. Hostin never responded directly. The View didn't address it, and that silence spoke volumes, because responding would require defending the indefensible. She'd have to admit nothing actually happened to her son. She'd have to explain why she assumed the worst about her neighbors and police without cause. She'd have to acknowledge that her story was, at best, misleading. So she said nothing.
People do. They lie. They say the stupidest. This is like people who name drop someone like, yo, I was in the room with Enrico Palazzi and I taught him how to sing, and they just say
Yeah.
She say cops. Just a group of cops. Just a little herd of policemen just walk around a white neighborhood looking for people like me.
Yeah. What is her name? I mean, come on, Kat. Her neighborhood is like, you know where she lives.
Okay, but also, okay, look, I'm not a little black boy, all right?
What?
But so can't speak for that. But speaking for myself, if I were out and I had a friend drag me up to the cops and be like, just so you know, if you see her out, she's not doing anything illegal. I'd be like, bro, what the
And her defenders pivoted to, you're attacking a black woman, which is the last refuge of a narrative that can't stand on its own. But Tyrus had already made the point. You don't get to lie and hide behind identity. You don't get to manufacture victimhood and demand applause. You don't get to weaponize race to avoid accountability. And you don't get to insult the intelligence of millions of viewers who can see through the performance. That's what this was about. Not whether racism exists, not whether black parents have legitimate fears, but whether Sunny Hostin told the truth. And based on her own words, the answer is no. She assumed, she projected, she performed, and when called out, she had no defense. Tyrus delivered the kill shot when he said this kind of behavior makes real racism harder to fight. Because when people hear stories like Hostin's, no evidence, no incident, just assumption and accusation, they tune out, they stop listening. They assume every claim is exaggerated or fabricated. That's not fair to actual victims, but it's the inevitable result of crying wolf in a mansion. The lesson here isn't complicated. Tell the truth. If your son was harassed, say so. Provide details, name names, demand accountability, but if nothing happened, if you just assumed it would happen based on stereotypes you claim to oppose, don't dress it up as bravery. Don't use your platform to smear innocent people. And don't expect applause for solving a problem that didn't exist. Tyrus understood that. Gutfeld understood that. And millions of viewers understood that. The only people who didn't were the ones invested in the narrative. Because once you admit Hostin was wrong, you have to admit the whole game is rigged. You have to admit that the view isn't about truth. It's about confirming biases. You have to admit that performative wokeness is just that, performance. And you have to admit that maybe, just maybe, the real racists are the ones who see bigotry in every shadow and assume the worst about everyone based on skin color. That's uncomfortable, but it's true. And Tyrus said it out loud, on national television, without flinching. That's why the segment resonated. Not because it was mean, not because it was partisan, but because it was honest. And honesty in this media environment is revolutionary. This isn't about Tyrus versus Hostin. It's about truth versus narrative, evidence versus assumption, and accountability versus identity politics. Sunny told a story that didn't hold up, Tyrus called it out. And the internet picks sides based on whether they value honesty or ideology. If you felt the sting when he called it a hoax, ask yourself why. Are you defending the truth or the tribe? Hit subscribe for takes that cut through the noise, drop your strongest counter-argument below, and share this with someone who thinks victimhood is currency. Let's keep it real.